Hey, Mike with Nerd Problems Gaming here, and welcome to Nerd Problems Gaming, the channel where we go through the good and bad of everything nerdy to make sure you spend your time on the best of the best. And today's video will be talking about, is Zelda Breath of the Wild worth it? Should you get it? Should you get a Switch to play it? And more. And so we'll be doing that review today, so stay tuned. Now, I finally just beat this game, so I figured it'd be a good time to do a review of this and talk about is it worth it or not. But one thing definitely going into this game is that it is huge, right? If you're trying to get all the intricate secrets, all the extra bonus dungeons, all the side quests that you have, it's going to probably take you 100+ hours or more to be able to do all that. And so again, this game is really big. There's a lot to dive into, so I'm going to cover a lot of it. And again, tell you whether it's worth it or not, should you pick up this game or not. And so for me, this was really the main driving force of me even getting a Switch. And so I talked about it in my review of the Switch. You know, was it worth it? Is it worth getting the system for this game alone? And for me, pretty much it was. And, you know, I was thankfully pleasantly surprised that there's a lot of other really great games for the Switch. They're always adding more on the virtual console, like the eStore that they have. And this is a really great game as well. So, I mean, even if you just got the system for this alone, I personally definitely think it'll be worth it. But, you know, one thing to start off with is kind of the storyline with this game. And this is a little bit unique compared to other Zelda games, but also has a lot of tie-ins to other Zelda games as well. So one thing that this game does a little bit different is that basically it shies away from more of the linear dungeon progression where you'll go to a dungeon, you'll get an item, right? You'll get the bow and arrow and then you can beat that dungeon. Or again, you'll get the hook shot and then you can beat that dungeon. So with this game, it's more wide open. It's going to feel more like Elder Scroll-esque, right? So more like Oblivion or Skyrim or the Elder Scrolls Online kind of thing. So it's way more open with this game than traditional Zelda games. And then that also kind of leads to the story being more open as well. So one thing that I liked about this story is, you know, most Zelda games, they kind of talk about every, you know, 100-year span or, you know, every 1,000-year span. Basically, like there's a gap of every, you know, 100,000, whatever the case might be, years. And so during that time, there's always like a hero that comes out, you know, Link, that kind of saves the day. So, you know, Ocarina of Time, it's the hero of time. You know, there's the hero of ages, the hero of seasons, right? So it just depends on what game you're playing, right? There's a different version of Link that comes about. There's a different Zelda that comes about, and then, you know, a different form of Ganon, being either, you know, that Ganondorf human form or, you know, more of the monster form in some of the games that he takes on. And so what I liked about this game is they basically kind of allude to that is what goes on, right? So they talk about, you know, 10,000 years ago, there was this huge battle where the good guys won, right? Link and Zelda, the hero, and the princess saved the day, you know, sealed Ganon away. And then, you know, flash forward in the more recent past, like 100 years ago, you were actually defeated, right? You, Zelda, the other heroes tried to take down Ganon and failed. And so that was kind of a cool where they actually talk about that in this game, where a lot of other Zelda games, you know, just like, oh, you know, hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago, the ancient hero, right? And you're kind of that reincarnation of that. But in this game, you're actually the hero coming back that failed 100 years ago. And so Zelda puts you in this like stasis chamber, and that's kind of how you start off the game. Is you come out of that chamber and now you have no memories. You have to figure out what happened, what you're doing here, and then again take down Ganon in this time, this age, and then save the day doing that. And so it's cool where it has that openness to it, where there are like 4 main dungeons and then Ganon. And now certainly if you wanted to, you could go directly to Ganon right from the very beginning after kind of beating the very initial area to get your initial powers, initial dungeons, right? And so again, that might take you an hour or two, something like that. Nothing, especially if you know what you're doing. You know, if it's a multiple playthrough for you, you could breeze through that very quickly and then head right to Ganon if you wanted. But you're probably going to get destroyed, you know, because you only have 3 hearts, you don't have any good gear, everything like that. And so, you know, within this game, there's 4 major dungeons, 4 heroes, 4 champions that really helped you 100 years ago, and you're going to try and restore them to power to take down Ganon. And so if you do that, it makes the final battle with Ganon a little bit easier, but then again, you don't necessarily have to do those. And what's cool is you can do those in any order, right? Where most Zelda games, you have to go from dungeon to dungeon to dungeon, and there's a set order, set storyline to it, where this one is kind of just wide open. Now there's also 120 different shrines, which are kind of like mini dungeons throughout the land. And so what's cool is you'll discover those as you wander around and explore the world. And now the world is enormous, which is really cool in that sense, where you can just get really sucked in and lost into it. I think I was maybe like 40, 50 hours in, I realized there's a piece of the map I'd never even been to yet. And I was like, holy crap, gotta explore that, right? And so, you know, totally new area opened up, all kinds of new dungeons, different things like that. And so it's really expansive. There's a lot to plug into. And, you know, a downside to that is the dungeons aren't super complex, right? It's probably only going to make like 10, 15 minutes to go through a dungeon to beat it. So nothing crazy, but I also like that because a lot of times I play in spurts where, you know, maybe I only have 15, 30 minutes to pick it up and play a little bit, go through a dungeon or two, and then I got to stop playing, right? And so it's nice in that aspect where you have those little dungeons that you can plow through to progress some when you just have a little bit of time to put into the game. But then you can also dive into it and be playing for hours at a time. There's always new stuff to do, new items to collect. And so that's another aspect with the game as well, where all these different dungeons that are out there, there's a lot of ways that you can solve and beat these dungeons. So kind of as a foundation with the game, you're going to get a few main powers that you have that can basically solve all the dungeons. So you've got a couple bombs, you've got a magnetic power where you can pick up certain objects and kind of throw them around, move them around with like magnetic power. You can stop time, and those are kind of the main ones. There's an ice power where you can create pillars of ice that you can climb on or cross water, or, you know, move things around with water and frozen ice. So those are kind of the main foundation powers that you get right at the start of the game, and you can use those throughout the entire playthrough of the game as well. But what I like is in a lot of these dungeons, there's a ton of different ways to really beat them, right? So you might need to take a torch and light other torches, or maybe you, instead of doing that, you take fire arrows and you light the torches, or maybe you take regular arrows and you light it on one of the torches that's already lit and move it around. So, or maybe you bring like a fire weapon with you and you can ignite the torches, right? So there's all kinds of different ways to beat these various dungeons. And so I like that. I think it's cool where you can just jump into a dungeon and be like, all right, well, how am I going to figure this out? You know, observing your surroundings, taking what items you have in your inventory and just solving it from there. So I like that aspect of it, where it gave you those puzzles where they're not super complex, but they're complex enough, and then there's a variety of different ways that you could beat them. Makes it a lot of fun too, so I like that as well. Now, one thing that is kind of frustrating and you know, maybe some people might not like, is that all of your weapons and have like a durability to them, so they're going to break. So as you play, you'll pick up different swords, different weapons, spears, you know, axes, right? And it's cool that there's all these different kinds of weapons that you can pick up and use, but they don't last that long. So they're going to be breaking constantly. You're going to have to find new ones. So that's kind of frustrating in that sense. You know, your inventory is only so big, so you'll have ones that you want, but then you don't have room for them. Or if you're going through new dungeons, you know, there might be a treasure chest in there that has a cool weapon, but you're full already. So now you got to decide which one you want to throw away. So I got frustrated a lot with that. You know, again, you get used to it over time as you play the game, so it's not the end of the world. But again, just starting off, it can definitely be frustrating, and especially if you're used to normal Zelda games where you get an item and you have it forever, right? And you can use it how you want. Another thing that you might not enjoy about this game is it does not have a lot of the Zelda typical weapons, right? There isn't the hook shot, there isn't like the power gloves where you can lift massive stones, or, you know, the boomerang, right? So there's a lot of different items and weapons that are traditionally in every single Zelda game that you're not going to find in this game. So that's kind of hit or miss, you know. It's a fresh change of pace to it, but then at the same time, some of the things that you might have enjoyed having in a lot of Zelda games, you're not going to necessarily find in this game as well. Another thing that I like that's cool too is that you can get all kinds of different armor, and as you play and progress, you're going to find great fairies, right? From the fairy fountains, like the Ocarina of Time, like the big fairies that you find, right? And so they're going to have the ability to enhance your armor, upgrade those. So that was a cool feature where you would go around and find different monster parts, items, fish, you know, plants, different things that you could put together to enhance your armor. And so that was a cool aspect too. And then another aspect too that I like is that there's a lot of just intricate detail that you wouldn't really expect, right? So there's areas, for example, that are really cold, and so there's like a temperature gauge, and so if you are too cold, you're going to start to take damage, right? You're going to start to freeze to death, and it's going to hurt you. But there's a lot of ways around it. You know, you could carry a torch, and that would provide some extra warmth. You could build a fire. You could wear warmer clothes that could protect you. You could create a food dish that has a cold protection to it. You might carry a fire weapon that would raise the temperature around you, so you could be in the cold longer without being hurt. So it's cool. There's, like I said, kind of with the dungeons, where there's a lot of ways to solve those dungeons, there's also a lot of ways to figure out a situation and get through that, right? You might be in a hot area, so you need to carry an ice weapon. You create heat resistance through potions, you know, you wear different clothing that gives you heat resistance. So there's all kinds of different ways, again, around these situations, which is really cool. So I like that aspect a lot. There's a lot that goes into it, a lot you might not think about, that's kind of behind the scenes, and, you know, even more intricate details like that. You can sneak up on things, get surprise attacks on enemies, you know, catch certain insects, certain bugs, certain things like that, where, you know, you startle them if you come up too fast. Another thing that's kind of cool, which I didn't necessarily use it all in the game, is that you can catch horses and you can tame them. You can get them different armor. There's different qualities of horses, so you can catch a bunch of different ones. And, you know, again, for me, I played it, like I said, maybe 100, 120 hours, around that range, and I never really even rode horses ever in the game. You know, I caught that first one, and I was like, oh, this is going to be so cool. I'll be able to ride horses around, and I just never found myself using it ever. You can, once you beat a shrine, you can teleport to that shrine, and so I just found there were so many locations that were close enough to where I wanted to go, and I could relatively get to where I wanted to go to by just running there. And so it didn't really make a lot of sense to deal with the hassle of pulling out a horse, riding it, getting off, you know, taming a horse. So I never really used them at all in the game. So maybe comment below if you use them a lot, but I found myself never really even using the horses in the game whatsoever. But, you know, it was a cool feature. I just never took advantage of it. And so, you know, like I said, there's a lot to go into this game. There's not the traditional linear dungeons, not the traditional items that you're going to find in every other Zelda game, but there's a lot more openness to it. It's kind of a new take on the Zelda franchise. I really liked it. I definitely think this game was worth it, especially if you don't have a Switch. You know, if you're like, hey, should I even buy a Switch to play this game? I think so. You know, if you have the money to, I definitely think it's worth picking this up. It was worth it for me to be able to play this. This has been one of my favorite Zelda games ever. Definitely top 5, if not top 3 out there. So again, I got a lot of enjoyment out of it. There's a lot to go into it. Like I said, it's a little bit different than your traditional Zelda game. Maybe a little bit less storyline. But at the same time, the story was good for what was there. I just found myself, again, you know, grinding out those dungeons, upgrading my weapon, finding new items. There's just so much to do and explore in this game. So it gives you a lot of, you know, replay value, a lot of play time, because you can do all of those dungeons in any order that you want. The main 4 dungeons, any order that you want. You can take down Ganon whenever you want. So there's just a ton that goes into this game, and I really liked it a lot. So again, if you haven't got this game, definitely worth adding to your nerd library if you haven't done so yet. So definitely pick it up, and this is definitely worth it in my opinion. And then even if you don't have a Switch, I think it'd be worth picking one up just to get this game alone. So again, hopefully you guys got some benefit and value out of this video. If you did, feel free to comment and share. And then also subscribe to our channel if you haven't. And then if you'd like to see, more videos like this faster, help us pick videos on the channel and more, consider becoming a patron of ours over on patreon.com/Nerd Problems Gaming. Like I said, it'll help support the channel, help get out more content faster. You'll get early access and more perks as well. So again, to check that out, head on over to patreon.com/Nerd Problems Gaming. And then if you'd like to plug into our Let's Plays, our live streams that we do over on Twitch, you can also follow us over there on twitch.tv/MikeMacDirect. Again, that's twitch.tv/MikeMacDirect. But again, thanks so much for tuning in. Pick up Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild if you haven't yet. But again, thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you more soon.